ਨਾਨਕ ਨਾਮ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਭਾਣੇ ਸਰਬਤ ਦਾ ਭਲਾ।
To mark a remarkable event in our shared history. Quite clearly we're here to commemorate a famous battle honour of the Sikhs serving in the former British Indian Army at Saragarhi. We'll hear about the battle later today and through it celebrate the long history of Sikh service alongside and within the British Army. Every time we gather we aim to promote and recognise Sikh military history and service, and to develop a mutual understanding between the Sikh community and your armed forces. As we'll hear later, the values demonstrated by the 21 Sikh warriors on this day in 1897 are the same values of the British Army today. And it's worth just remembering what those are: courage, discipline, respect for others, integrity, loyalty and selfless commitment, and absolutely displayed in 1897 and at the heart of the British Army today.
Saragarhi saw 21 Sikhs of the British Indian Army defend a small outpost against the onslaught of 10,000 Pathans invading into a British area. The significance is great, particularly for British Indians, because it's a contribution historically which connects Sikhs to Britain. They served Great Britain, they were defending British interests out there, but it also says a lot about the nature of the Sikhs who served. This idea that we are a martial race, we will defend our principles, righteousness, justice, truth, and we will fight for what we believe in. So it has a lot of connotations for British Sikhs, certainly Indians generally around the world. What it means is you can always trust, you can always rely upon a Sikh to do the righteous thing, and that's informed by the Sikh ethos given to us by our gurus. I think post-Indian independence, commemorating the battle became quite difficult for the British. Don't forget, this battle was honoured and rewarded by the British at the time in 1897 with a Battle Honour Day, with a regimental holiday, with awards, Indian Orders of Merit for all the soldiers who fought, not just the 21 at Saragarhi, but 30 odd Indian Orders of Merit also given to those who fought at Fort Gulistan and Lockhart. Post-independence, it became quite difficult to commemorate because it seemed to be an Indian thing. It seemed to be a foreign battle honour and a foreign battle. Bringing it back onto the agenda in Britain, I think, is quite important. It not only connects Sikhs to Great Britain, where I'm a third generation British Sikh, but it also says a lot about British history and where we've come from. And if we're trying to look through to the future and inspire younger generations to serve, not just in the armed forces, but in public life generally, I think these sorts of commemorations are important to show them where their communities come from, what they did for Britain, and how it can inspire future generations.
To me, as a soldier, this is an inspirational story. To hear of 21 men faced with adversity and knowingly going into battle facing their death, which was an inevitable consequence of the assault on the fort, on the outpost at Saragarhi. It can be nothing other than truly inspirational to see the courage these men had in the face of inevitable defeat. And yet they stood fast. They stood their ground, they fought to the last, they used and expended all of their available ammunition and took to bayonets in a pretty gruelling fight. Over 7 hours to have that grit, determination and resolve, that's a truly inspirational story. I think it's always important to remember what our predecessors, our forebears have done for us to secure the freedoms that we enjoy today. And the tale of Saragarhi, along with countless other tales of valour and courage on the battlefield, are always key to remind us it's how lucky we are to be in the position we find ourselves. As a soldier, I draw inspiration from it. As a British Sikh, I feel privileged to have that heritage to call upon. And I'm keen that more and more people learn and educate themselves about the proud heritage that we have been bestowed upon us.
I think when you're looking at Britain particularly, I mean, India has a long history of multiculturalism, really. And in Britain, it's a fairly recent phenomenon. And one of the ways that we're finding that communities are best able to come together is when they have something in common. Rather than celebrating differences, it's when people have a shared history or a shared stake in their culture that people really do come together. So in Britain, for example, the army and the war effort is something that fills a lot of people with a lot of pride. I think Matthew was saying in his presentation that of the 4 things that Britons are most proud of, the armed forces is one of them. But the armed forces tell the story that's relevant for society today, because the armed forces has historically been filled by Indians, by Hindus, by Muslims, by Sikhs, by people from the West Indies, by people from Africa. And it's interesting that from the presentation what we see, the armed forces of 1914, of 100 years ago, looks more like Britain of today than it did of the Britain of 1914. So recognizing that narrative is important for the Britain of today, and of course, having that shared history does give people a sense of comradeship with each other, a sense of brotherhood with each other, and a shared history. So in these fraught times where communities could be seen to fracture for a number of reasons, I think it makes it all the more important to share such narratives. The education system does need to do more, and I think that's recognised within the education system also. Our project, The British Future, called Untold and Unknown Stories, which represents the stories of the Indian Muslims in the First World War, is working with the education system so that lesson packs will be created that demonstrate not only the Muslims but also the Hindus and the Sikhs that fought together for the British Indian Army during World War I. Now that is designed to go into cities like Leicester. Leicester has a high Indian population of Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs, but also we can't take it for granted that these communities are always going to get on. So part of the reason why we're spreading this information is because information is the root of getting rid of prejudice. And prejudice feeds off ignorance. So getting rid of that ignorance and demonstrating that Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs have fought historically together and fought for Britain together is the most powerful way of achieving that. And especially in the education system, you're right, it needs to increase, and it is doing so, I think.